first, let's hang on a second. All right. So the first thing I'd like to do is let's get to know everyone just a bit. And we have several people on the call, so we wanted to make this kind of a quick activity. And I'm going to put this link in chat, and we just want to hear a little bit from everyone and where you are today. So give me just a second. From you. And while you're doing that, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Beth Hedger. I'm one of the Hacking HR Boise chapter liaisons, and Camus Freeman is also here today. She's also on our Hacking HR team for Boise. And as you'll see in group chat, I've just put a poll everywhere link. So if you could paste that in a browser and just quickly let us know your name, your company or organization, and the location you're calling from today. And let's see, let me do that, and that should start with some responses. Welcome, Fisher Technology. Welcome, Kirsten. I think you may have the longest distance person. Hi, Kyle, welcome. Camus. Hopefully that's a fairly easy. Hi, Cindy, I see you're responding in chat. Good to have you here, all the way from Connecticut. Hopefully in the group chat you see the poll, and then just quickly grab that, throw a response out there, and you'll see it on the screen. That's okay. We're all trying out this new technology. Poll everywhere is kind of a fun tool, and we wanted to share today. Oh, welcome from Argentina. Okay, that might be the longest distance participant of the day.
Yeah.
Karen Drew is in chat from Trinity Trailer in Boise. Rhiannon Albert, HR consultant, Meridian, Idaho. Welcome. I'm also in Nampa, Idaho, for those of you who are familiar with the Treasure Valley. So, well, great. All right. So, HR student, excellent. Well, we hope you can get a good lot out today. Hello, Amber. Welcome. Good to see you. All right. I think everyone has had a chance to kind of check in there. Let me get PowerPoint to cooperate again. And then before we get going, we had a quick question we wanted to pose to the group as well, and I'm going to put that in chat. So our next question will just kind of give us an idea and kind of help focus our conversation today, because we realize that folks could be in all level of experience with virtual teams, and we just had a quick way we wanted to get your feedback on that. So in chat, I posted the next poll everywhere, and hopefully you can grab that and give us some of your, kind of give us an idea of where you are in this. And it's fine if you're, kind of new or curious. We hope that if you have that thought leader experience, that you're feel free to jump in later when we have some Q&A time and share some of your ideas. Okay, it looks like we have a lifeline down there at the bottom. We have a fire hose drinker. Okay, so understand, it's all challenging. We're all at different places in this experience. We've been thrust into it, some of us. All right, let me see if we have something in chat. Kind of interesting to see as everyone starts to weigh in on this question.
Mm-hmm.
So Camus, this kind of gives me an idea of our audiences from all experience spaces, and I think it'll make for a very rich conversation.
Yes.
All right. Well, give you guys another moment or two to put your responses in. See if anybody else has any more to weigh in. And all right. Well, really appreciate that bit of participation, and we knew we'd have quite a few people here today, and we knew it'd be very challenging to go around the room and introduce ourselves. We want to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for participating in the polls. And I'm going to hand this over to Camus so that she can share the material she wanted to present today. And just as kind of to set the stage, Camus is sharing some principles and ideas that she experienced when she was working with a client. And it's just a really good dialogue piece where we can kind of think about some of the elements of creating remote workspaces and working with digital tools. Just one example of one way to go about it. And we really hope that in the chat, if you have some ideas or questions, feel free to put those in there as she's walking through, and we will have plenty of time for dialogue later on after we walk through a couple slides. So with that, I'll hand that over to Camus.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And Beth, I don't have my chat box up, so will you let me know if there's questions or maybe a good time to pause based on the questions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I will be watching that.
Okay. So just a little background of kind of how this topic came about. A couple of weeks ago, we had a similar call and really got some feedback about what was happening, where kind of people were having questions. And it really came up that moving to a remote work environment was new to a lot of people. A lot of people do have experience working remotely, so it was an easy, seamless transition. However, companies and or individuals, this was a new experience, and not only is it new, it's happening super fast. And so really wanted to talk about maybe how to do that in terms of how do you now manage people and manage work and keep them engaged kind of through this change. And then specifically about the digital tools was really around MS Teams. I think that's a really common tool people are using in kind of our audience. So we're going to talk about that specifically. So kind of first off, I want to say, acknowledge, like, for a lot of people, this is really challenging, right? Maybe their teams aren't used to working remotely. Maybe some companies didn't have from home policies in place. There's security concerns, like what's happening, what type of work, distractions, right? See, you have your kids, people are trying to teach their kids from home. You have animals and pets. I know my dog's like driving me nuts. And then, really keeping engaged with people when you're not kind of used to this environment. And then also, how do you keep work going and what does that look like? And then also just the challenge of actually using the tools. So best practices, what works, doesn't work when you're kind of thrust into this in a quick way. So that's kind of some of the key challenges we're hearing. So then what? So what happens when now your team's working remotely? Maybe you've launched these tools. Now what? And I recently was working with a client on another project, but in the midst of when COVID happened. So really it became me helping them kind of transition. Now, fortunately, they were already set up with O365, so they had those tools in place. And so from that perspective, that did make it easier. However, they had not been using them was one part of it. And the other part of it is the diversity of their workforce. They had some in-office team, and then they also had field workers. And some of those field workers or people that worked in the shop didn't even have a company email because that wasn't part of their job. And so how do we communicate with them? So as we talk through some of this, this is kind of the example that I'm using. So one of the first things we looked at was, okay, we got to figure out this communication plan. And given what was happening, like it was happening so fast. And so the first thing we were like, okay, we got to figure out how we're going to communicate people. We have people all over the country, we have people in the field. How are we going to make this happen? And so we initially set up email communication because that's kind of what we had in place. And this is literally within the first few days. And so, you know, we created a framework similar to this. And this is just an idea. There's all different ways you could structure this potentially based on your work base or your workforce. But this was kind of what we looked at is we wanted to be able to communicate broadly. And pretty quickly, we're able to set up a virtual town hall using Teams within the first week that we could connect the entire company, which was about 85, 90 people using MS Team tools. So that worked really well. And also connecting with our team. So starting with the leadership team, making sure we were on the same page, and then those leadership teams kind of trickling down that communication one-on-one with their teams. And again, depending on the size of a company, like, you know, one-on-one or calling every single person may not be an option. And then being able to get that end user tool support to those employees really quickly. So we were able to kind of create some training materials and set up times where they could call in for help, or we also posted that information. The next part that I feel is really important, particularly, you know, it's funny talking about this where it's in a response to this kind of pandemic versus a normal transition to this type of environment where there's this kind of plan and you're drawing it out. So, you know, I'm kind of talking about this in terms of a quick way to do this versus maybe what would happen long term. But the topic that was asked initially was really around, you know, keeping this productive. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on. But I think the underlying conversation is also about, you know, being understanding and flexible with the teams as they're working through this. But starting with that work from home policy. So maybe you do have one, but, you know, if someone signed that when they started and maybe that they never actually worked from home, you may be just sending out a reminder of that policy, or you may actually be creating an emergency policy, for example. And then also having those managers communicating directly to their team. So that could be everything from what work needs to accomplish, like, you know, is this business as usual, or are we making changes? I think about sales teams, for example, right? They're going to have to shift how they approach their work. It may not stop, but they may have to change how they do that. So making sure those expectations, maybe even in messaging, are really clear, and how they're communicating to customers as well. And then projects, like what is happening? Have projects been delayed? Have they changed based on, you know, what's happening? Making sure that the teams and that awareness is really clearly defined. So collaborative tools, obviously, if we want people to be effective working from home, they need tools to do so. So assuming that most people are going to have access to email, right? That's most common. There are other tools that are going to make that experience better, and allow them to be more effective, productive while they're working from home. And so we're really talking specifically about MS Teams, and then we're also going to talk about Trello, which is a project management tool if you're not familiar, and how those tools can help keep work going, but also keeping in mind if this is a first time that people are using those tools, making sure they do have access to the training, and also keeping it simple as we're rolling out tools, and not trying to put too much onto them at one time. Training and advocacy. So in a normal environment, when you're transitioning to remote work or doing some sort of change, you kind of, want to create advocates out in certain areas of the business as you're rolling something out. It's similar in this case, where it's kind of a rapid change, but also a little bit different, right? Where we're like having to do this. In some ways, I feel like it could be easier to transition versus, getting a lot of pushback from people maybe who don't want to make a change to virtual work. Everyone's having to. And so that in some ways could make this easier. But really making it on the inset, or initially, the managers and leaders who are interacting with each employee is really up to speed, and they feel like they have the knowledge to help drive their teams. But also, as HR and leaders, getting the feedback from those managers. So for example, like what might be unique to their team that we need to do differently, or provide extra support for. For example, in the client that I mentioned, we had people in fabrication, and they didn't have an email address. So how do we get them the information they need? Well, in Teams, you can use external email addresses, and getting their personal email, and then also sending them very detailed instructions on how to download Teams to their phones so that they could call into that virtual town hall, for example. And really creating those kind of trainings that are simple, easy to use, simple screenshot, right? I think Snippet in Windows is a free version. There's a lot of tools that you can use. In fact, at the end, I've posted a kind of help resources on my website that I'll share at the end. About free tools. There's also tools you can purchase to make simple little videos, like Snagit or Loom. But making sure that they have that information so they know where to go. And then kind of lastly is lead by example. So again, and we're thrust into this change, which is really easy for some, harder for others. But we as HR leaders, we're saying, hey, we have to change to do this, but we also have to be using the tools and helping to guide that adoption by leading by example. So for example, if we've made kind of the commitment to use MS Teams for our teamwork, but somebody's continuing to send files via email, that's an opportunity for us to maybe, direct them to how to get it, or how to save or use or share that information using Teams, and not kind of engaging or responding in that email. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to pause there before we go to the next thing. Are there any questions? Because I don't have that chat up, Beth, or is there anything you feel like?
So far, we don't have any questions. I would be curious, because we've got folks that are kind of across the spectrum in terms of virtual work experiences, and there's the ability in Zoom to raise your hand. So if you have a comment or a thought you'd like to share, and keep in mind, we're talking at a pretty high level, so
Yes.
we do welcome your ideas and thoughts, and we want this to be interactive where possible. So give everyone a moment to, think about if you have a question or a comment. Everyone looks shy today.
It's shy day. It's okay.
It is, truly.
I was just excited that I actually did my hair and makeup. Well, at least I curled the front part, not the back. Because normally I'm in a ball cap.
It's funny, so
yeah.
Definitely. So I would be curious from the folks that are joining today if there are, particular, challenges you're experiencing that maybe you'd like to talk about, or maybe you've had a really great success story in this rapid move to virtual work kind of experience. And we'd love to hear some of those stories if you have them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll take another pause again, and then we'll also, of course, I'd love some dialogue at the end. So are you ready to continue on? Beth?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I just want
What
to make
you got?
Okay. So we're going to jump into
So Beth, hi, this is Holly. I don't mean to interrupt.
Hi.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to share some of the things that we're doing because we're spread out throughout the country, mostly in Arizona, and also headquarters is in Houston, Texas. I'm actually in Arizona, so I'm crashing your hacking HR Boise. Just
That's
because
okay. We're being crashed by the globe today, and it's awesome. We're really glad to have everyone here.
Well, we're starting a chapter here in Phoenix, and somehow I've been elected as the point person, and anyway, I'm doing it, and I'm excited. But some of the things that my company has been doing is with their team. We've been doing, obviously this is a virtual lunch, and then we've been doing virtual happy hours, and it's after work hours. And the only thing we say there's a couple rules. You can't talk about work. And so I'm having one tomorrow night, and I'm going to ask them to come with 5 good things that have happened from COVID. Because you know what? There's been a lot of bad things. I've gone through furloughs. I've gone through layoffs. I've gone through it all. And it's pay reduction was the worst, 25% across the board. So I've gone through it, tears. I've gone through all different emotions, but I don't want to talk about work with my team. And I really want them to think about, 5 really good things that they can say came out of this, because there is good things that have come out of it. So I just wanted to put that out as an idea. And also, I didn't want to sit here kind of like a stalker on your chapter. And I just wanted
It's okay.
No.
I just wanted to put that
Well,
out.
and
So I think
you
it's
bring up a really good point.
Yeah, I just think it'll be fun to see what they come up with. Even
Yeah,
though our kids drive us crazy, and our dogs and all of that, it's still a little bit of a blessing, besides wanting to wring their necks half the time, but that's okay.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of really fun things, and, keeping, as managers or even HR, keeping the teams engaged by doing those is super important. So thank you for mentioning that. So, okay, so we're going to jump into, these are the questions, and even before this happened, were common things that would kind of come up regarding using Teams. So one is really around, like, when do I create a team? Like, what kind of things should you consider? Same thing with channels. A common challenges, then you get too many challenges and then trying to figure out where those conversations are. And then managing the work, how if you haven't been using project management tools, maybe you've been using an Excel spreadsheet or some other tool, how are you then managing your teams? So that this is, again, pretty high level at this point. So if at the end we want to kind of deep dive into anything specific, that would be great if someone wants to bring that up. So one of the things that I feel like comes up a lot is people just trying to understand what the framework is. And there are more kind of tools. There's another kind of bigger picture. But when you're thinking about, do I use Teams? Do I use Yammer? Do I, what are the things? It's really this is a nice high level way of really looking at it. So again, we're kind of focused on the teams part of the discussion and the projects and the teams that you're working with on a regular basis. So I'm gonna now, I created a kind of test. Whoops. Why is this? Oh, here we go. A test team in Teams, and I just have the free version. If a company has like a, I guess called enterprise version or a business version, there's going to be some more things that come with it. So I have a really just the free version, so I don't have everything, but this just kind of gives an idea. And actually, I missed a slide, but that's okay. Okay, so here's my kind of fake test team setup. And this is really based on a previous experience I had using Team, not the client version I just was kind of talking about. So this is a little bit different way to think about it. But when we set up our teams, really think about what's the goal or purpose of the team. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then also who's part of that team, and that kind of helps decide what and how you're going to set up your team, because you don't want to get to a point where you have like 100 teams, right? It's just overwhelming. And so, for example, when we set up our US call center HR team, that was a dispersed team. However, there was some commonalities about the work they were doing that was different from the rest of the business. And so it made sense for us to have a team based on that work. When we went to create the channels, this isn't all of them, but we kept it really simple and really focused on what are the things that were really common that we were working on as part of this team. There's a ton of policy. If anyone is familiar with call center or customer service, you'll kind of understand policy and recruiting. Those are typically some of the biggest areas. And then when we went to look at global HR initiatives, this is really our senior HR leadership team, where we were looking, this is, senior teams on the team, and they're looking at things that impact the whole global HR. So for example, we may have some channels or some work that we're doing that is, ongoing. This is type of projects that maybe happen every year where we're working on certain kind of buckets of information. But because this COVID came up, now we have kind of this task force where we're focused on this specific response. So there's going to be things specific to what's happening right now. So that's a way to structure channels. One of the things I think that happens is people start creating so many channels that it's just really overwhelming, but keeping it specific to topics in this way. Now, my team that I had, there was like 6 of us. So we were kind of a small team and we were working on really specific initiatives. So for us, it was really easy just to have 2 tabs. One was general, where we put the majority of our information, but then we also had media because we were sharing a lot of digital files. And so that just made it a lot easier for us to manage our work. So, and then when we went to actually manage our projects, I'm personally a fan of Trello, which is what this is right here. And it is a project management tool that you can use independently or you can use inside of Teams, which I have added to here by adding as a tab. Now, the one caveat to using something like Trello is that it basically requires you to have a separate login and, account in Trello to be able to use or be added into the team. So that may not be for everyone. For us, that was fine. We only had 6 people. But when I was helping my client, we actually leveraged Planner, which is the same kind of bucket approach to managing projects. And that worked a lot better. It was already part of, their tool set, and it didn't require any additional logins or accounts. And so we were able to get that set up really quickly for them as well. But it's kind of that same concept. I gave an example of how I often run my projects, but there are a ton of different ways in which you can leverage Trello or create projects using the bucketed system. So I don't know how much, I don't want to maybe go into a ton of detail because maybe people are already familiar with this, but just to give an idea quickly, if you, some of the functionality, let's say, you wanted to kind of create a description about what you're doing. You wanted to tag someone in that's on your team and write a comment to them. They would get that notification. You can set due dates. You can create labels. These are just some that, I kind of use for this purpose. You can attach documents. When we do, I use this for my editorial. I love it for my editorial because we can attach all the final documents and kind of move it through the flow. You can add members. So if there's multiple people on one card or one task, and then when that task is done, you can simply drag it over to complete. Now with Planner, there's some things that you can do there that I like, as far as like reporting that, I don't use in Trello. So it's just one of those kind of preference things, and depending on your setup and how many people are in your company or using or on the project or using this tool. So that's just kind of a quick idea. How I do like now, next, future. Now, given if we're like responding or we created this specific to the response of COVID, now might be weekly, right? So now might be this week, these are all the things that we have to get done. And next might be next week. And then you kind of add in cards and kind of move them through the process. But when I usually work with clients or on longer term projects, now might be 1 to 3 months. Next might be 3 to 6 months example. So again, tons of ways to use it. There's like a ton of templates. You can Google just about any template and get a really good idea on how to use that. So that's just kind of a quick overview of, some kind of, I guess, best practices around structuring your teams and channels and also using projects. Again, I was able to create this and put it as a tab at the top. One idea too, like in this case where we are dealing with this COVID response, for example, I could link this page that we created for our clients, but use that as an example so that that's right in that help page, easy for employees to access. If there's something either on your site or another site or something that you're wanting to direct them to. So there's some really great ways to utilize Teams, just given what's happening in this situation and keeping people engaged. And then just keeping it fun, like Holly mentioned, right? Like we want to keep people engaged. You know, you can send gifts, you can send different things, you can, you know, do challenges in here just to keep people
Hey,
you know,
Camus,
engaged during your work. Yeah.
we do have a question in chat from
Okay.
Leanne Hawk. She was curious if you've, you know, how you might be able to create a town hall meeting in Teams, or if you're familiar with anything like that.
Yes. So I actually do know how to do that, but because I have the free version and not the enterprise version, it actually, you have to have the calendar synced to Outlook, which I don't have. So, Leanne, I can call you and show you how to do that separately. I'd be happy to do that. And I'm sorry I don't have it on here to show you, but it's really, I can actually maybe tell you how to do it if you have it, is to go into the team, into the, I think, general tab. And then on the left, there in this area here is going to be like the calendar. So you can actually create it in there. So like this would be my all company team that I would do that in. And then you can create the virtual town hall in there. And there's should be like a polling feature. And video, just similar to what we're doing now in there. So
Wonderful.
hopefully,
Has anyone else had any other experience with doing that? Is it been a helpful approach, or is everyone also kind of thinking, I haven't tried this in Teams, or we've done it some other ways? We'd love to hear other ways you've pulled off a town hall that maybe didn't involve Teams that might be useful for others to know about. I know that one option with Zoom, which is what we're using right now, is if you can get Zoom that allows for more people to participate, and you have a lot more administrator tools that you can set it up where when people join, they're automatically muted and that kind of thing. So that's another approach to doing a town hall as well. And then that would just be sent out like a webinar or a Zoom meeting to team members. So that's an alternate approach as well, if you have that.
Hey, this is Kristen speaking. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you.
Awesome. So my experience with MS Teams is indeed this is a great tool for like internal use, like for example, internal town hall meetings and things like that, because you have the chance to not only talk to the people, but also share your documents with them and work on the documents in that way and really do your job and really involve people while doing your job, especially when it's about smaller teams working on specific projects and things like that. You also can show a lot with, you know, if you have the wiki files set up in a proper way, you can also show that to new team members or to team members who might not work on every part of the project and things like that. So it combines several things that you would have, like having a call, having a chat, having the documents that you need to work on, having a wiki and knowledge sharing option that you could work with and work on whenever it's needed, just as it's shown here. So there are several options that you could use that I don't see in such an easy way in Zoom or any other sources that are out there. So therefore I would always go with MS Teams if there's a chance for that. Besides that, I also know that, you know, if you use Zoom, for example, that might look a bit more professional when it's about, you know, being with people like outside your business, like when it's about customers or things like that. Could be ON24, things like that. So there are a lot of other options, and it really depends on what exactly do you need and what exactly is it that you would like to use it for. And with that, you should do kind of a benchmarking, really thinking about, okay, so this is what it takes and this is where it doesn't take. So maybe I should choose Teams for this way and maybe Zoom or something else for another way. So that would be my little comment on that one. Thanks.
Absolutely. It's just understanding what you're trying to accomplish and whether or not the tool does what you need it to do. Travis was also commenting in chat that his organization uses Salesforce, and we are able to quote chatter unquote in the tool. But he's also saying that it seems like Team might be a much easier application, and it really just depends on what your organization has adopted or is considering adopting too. So
yeah, I
check
think
out the tools you have for options.
right. Yeah, and what maybe checking out the tools that you have. I think that's a really good point, because I feel like you know, when I go somewhere, and this happened with to me with this HR team is, and there was 60 global HR people, and nobody was using the tools. And so my whole job was to get everybody to use the tools. But at the same time, they were like trying to look for other things. And it was like, wait a minute, we already have the tools. It was just not understanding how to use them and what to use them for. So definitely start by looking with what you have. I do think Teams is a really good option. I think the one challenge is people having an understanding of how it works with the other tools. So SharePoint, you know, just different quirks that kind of come with using it. But, you know, again, providing that training, keeping it simple, especially initially, makes for easier adoption. All right. Anything else? So I did create a page. I'm going to add, excuse me, some more things to it. And I don't know if we can send this out or whatever, but it's just off of my main page. It's just StackRock Talent /remote, but just some things, collaborative tools, free screen capture tools, different things. And I'll continue to add to this. Anyone's welcome to visit that if they're interested. And if anyone wants to connect offline and talk about anything more in depth, I'd love to chat. I'm always love talking about this stuff, and would love to learn also from if anyone else has any tips or things that they'd want to share with me as well.
Well, one thing I'd like to throw out there to everyone else here on the call today is, you know, we're HR kind of talking to HR, but in thinking about how to support your organization in learning to use these tools and leverage the opportunities that are there, what are some things people are doing right now to help your teams be successful? Because part of it is we need to use the tool and kind of role model that, but I'm just wondering, you know, how that's going for folks. Maybe I should do a quick poll and we could have people give us some thoughts, but feel free to open up your mic and we can just chat about that a bit.
This is Kristen again, if I may.
Sure.
So the situation that I'm in is I just recently, like really recently, within this whole COVID thing, joined a new firm, which is completely different to the firm where I was before, because I'm absolutely used to working remotely. We did that in that firm like kind of constantly. The new firm has no experience with that, but they were thrown into it like, okay, from one day to the other you have to lock down, and now you somehow have to just get it done. We didn't have the VPN ready. We didn't have the laptops ready. There was nothing really like in there. And people were absolutely like frustrated because they had no chance to, get stuff done, have the kids around, the dogs, whatever it might be at the end. So first of all, it really was about the mindset. It really was about, helping them, seeing that as a chance to learn something new, to see a development that the firm actually maybe was not ready for, but people were interested in. They wanted to work from home every now and then, things like that. So we worked on, or I tried to work with them on their mindset, getting it like an open mindset, open approach. That was my first thing that I really saw and really needed to do. And the second thing is I prepared, and we're actually preparing a home office training where I give them some hints and tricks that I myself developed over my time, like kind of routines, also out of webinars like yours, for example, where I also check in like, okay, how are others doing, things like that, and set up some tips and tricks that I think work for this specific firm and this specific team, because obviously there are a lot of differences depending on where you are and what you're doing. So that training will happen, I will record it so that they can check in again. I will give them the tools and tell them, this is the list of tools that I find helpful. And I do regular check-ins with them, like with all people, like, okay, how do we feel today? Positive, negative, and so on. And I offer mindfulness training so that they really have this kind of, focused chance to get into that. And I do specific training with the leaders where I say, okay, guys, remember, working or leading a remote team is completely different to leading a team that is with you in the office. What does that mean? How do you need to check in with your people now on a regular basis and things like that? So that I have all these different tools that I try to work on all together, hoping that with that people feel more comfortable, and tell them to be patient. This is a learning curve for all of us, and it's not something that happens within 24 hours. It's something we all work through, and our kids learn that indeed there is time when mommy isn't available, even though she is there. Things like that will come up, step by step, and we should all be patient and very grateful that we are healthy and that we can still do our job. And that would be my part on how I see the whole thing. Thank you.
Yeah. Really good. Absolutely. And I think, all of those things that you're talking about with the mindset is super important. And also that's coming from the top down. I feel like that, is really beneficial to the rest of the people. And, for you to be able to create all those is perfect. Some people may not be comfortable creating all those or kind of have that tools. And so partnering with maybe someone from marketing or something like that to help create those tools, if that's not something you're used to doing or familiar with. But I love all the things about, training the leaders and making sure they know how to then manage the remote people, because we don't know how long this is going to go on. And in some cases, this may become, more normal. This might be an introduction and a wake up for some companies that, hey, some of their work can be done remotely and it's actually more cost effective for them to do so, right? And so I think we're going to see a shift. I think a lot will still go back, but I think a lot will stay remote. So I love all those ideas. Anything else?
Are there other tools people are using, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
I know that Travis mentioned Salesforce, and that was one place where they were engaging, but what are you finding out there that your companies are using that has been useful for you? Have they been doing town halls? Are you the one tagged with doing the town hall and trying to bring folks together? Just curious about kind of the pulse.
So this is Leanne Hawk. We actually use Teams quite a bit, but more from the meeting standpoint, and that's one thing that I have actually loved with the new remote change. We are a technology company, but with that being said, we still have different sections of our company that are not as technically adept as others.
Sure.
But it's been neat to go through that, and that's one thing that I, as an HR person, miss the most is the personal connections. And so I use Teams a lot, like literally every meeting I use. I try to have my camera on, and I try to get other people to have theirs to keep that connection going between us and the employees. But I think this is an awesome tool that is easy for people to use.
Yeah. Agree. I'm really glad you brought up about the video. So that is really key in keeping that engagement and keeping a connection to people. And like you said, using it in Teams is really pretty easy. And so I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that is important to keep people engaged. And not everyone wants to be on video, but sometimes you can kind of secretly force them to do it by just calling them, and then they look silly if they're not on video and you are, or whatever.
Well, and I think part of it is making that a standard.
Yes.
And not, I mean, no judgment zone, right? I mean, like, we're all in our homes. Who cares what's back behind
Yeah.
you? Or, I mean, I had one employee yesterday that was changing the background. I mean, there's different features that
Yeah.
you can change what's behind you.
Right.
But really, this has become more of a real world, and gives us a different insight. And I mean, I have an employee that reports directly to me. I literally call him every morning. And it's good just to be like, okay, he's sitting at his desk, he's, he's ready to go, and so from a manager standpoint, that helps me, like, okay, yeah, they're ready, because we were not, even as a technology company, ready for, I mean, we quickly were able to move into remote, but as a culture, we weren't ready to move into remote work. So
Yeah, it's definitely a culture shift. And, I think about what Holly brought up about, the good things or whatever. I think about the number of people I have connected with over video since this happened that I may not have been able to connect with before because, when you think about going to coffee or different things, well, I'm like, okay, well, I'm like a month out, right, for going to coffee because of the time it takes versus, setting up a networking call over video and meeting someone for the first time. It's actually been so much fun. And like I mean, I'm a ball cap wearer, so I pretty much wear my ball cap every day. And me and this person met for the first time. I'm in my ball cap. She's in her robe with her coffee. I mean, like, it was awesome. And now it's like almost like an extra bond that, everyone's in this together and we're making the best of it and having the virtual happy hours and doing those things that, I do feel like that's one of the good that's coming out of this. And also maybe forcing that mindset or the culture shift. Whereas before, I may have to do this whole campaign over months to get people to make a change. And now it's like, okay, here you go, sink or swim, right? So there's definitely some good.
Well, I'm wondering if we're ready to do a little wrap up and a teaser for next week. So I impromptu created a poll just now and I'm putting it in chat. And you want to take a moment to take a look at that. And I'm just going to pull up the poll everywhere page and it'll start showing. You can tell I'm being very impromptu here, real time, live. And let me share my desktop, hang on. So check the link in your chat, stick that in a browser, and we'll start seeing. So I'm just curious, what one new thing did you learn today from our dialogue or that you can take back? And it's going to end up looking like a word cloud. So just kind of think about we'll start seeing that. So it is a challenge if you're not used to being in the virtual space. You really have to think about how you're, structuring your day differently, how you're interacting with your team. So struggle is the biggest word on here. Oh my goodness. Collaboration, staying in contact. Collaboration. Wow. All right. Okay, so let me stop this for a moment and go back to Zoom. So I really want to thank everyone for being here today. I wanted to share with you our next events that we're doing, and we've the Hacking HR Boise team came together and identified 3 areas we thought would be very good to get out there quickly to everyone in the community. And we're also thinking about doing an executive roundtable sometime in May, where there can be a dialogue with some leaders around some challenges in the Treasure Valley. So before we finish, though, I wanted to just put up the information for next week and grab my PowerPoint, the right page, and then I will share. All right, so next week we have an opportunity to get together. For those of you that are curious or interested, there'll be an Eventbrite coming out soon, but we're looking at a new time next week, 11 a.m. to 12 noon Mountain Standard Time in Boise, well, virtually in Boise. Our topic is going to be around cybersecurity and working from home, and we've worked with a local cybersecurity leader in Boise who has a top 10 list to share with us to kind of get a dialogue around, while we're being virtual, how do we ensure we're protecting our company assets while we're on calls and sharing files and those kinds of things. Just some basic things we probably all know, but it's good to have a reminder and just talk a little bit about how we can protect our companies in this virtual setting. So I'm going to stop that share and see if anyone else has any additional thoughts or questions or feedback to us.
What about other topics maybe we should talk about?
And other topics, we would definitely be open to that. We've kind of run through the list that we got a couple weeks ago. So if you have an idea, feel free to contact Camus or myself. Tina Combs is also on the call today. She's also part of the liaison group for the Hacking HR Boise team. If you have an idea, you can put that in our chat. We'll collect them that way. But we really look forward to finding things that are meaningful for Boise, and we also appreciate our remote friends from around the world who've joined us today. We really appreciate your taking your time in your different time zones, and I can't imagine if you're in your PJs or if you're, just starting your morning. So really happy that you were able to join us too, and hopefully it was useful for you.
Beth, this is Holly again. I'm just wondering because obviously this is my first time coming into a group, but have you concentrated on